Starseek Voyager. Tonight, we drift into the vast library of the mind. On the surface, our past seems carved in stone, reliable, fixed, a clear record of who we are. But beneath that calm exterior, there is a hidden realm, an unseen weaver that works tirelessly in the dark. It hums with a quiet, ancient energy, stitching together moments that may never have truly happened, blending fact with delicate fiction. It is a mystery as old as consciousness itself, a reminder that our history is not a statue. If you enjoy these quiet explorations into the unknown, I invite you to like, subscribe, or share a thought below. It helps others find their way here too, one sleepy soul at a time. But for now, just settle in. Let the noise of the day simply drift away. Allow your eyes to grow heavy and breathe. Let's begin. Memory is not a precise recording of a past event. It is a biological process of reconstruction. Every time you recall a moment, your neurons rebuild the scene from the ground up. Imagine the room you are in right now. The light is low, the air is still. Your mind fills the empty spaces with what it expects to see. It takes a sound from yesterday and places it here. It takes a feeling from today and weaves it into the past. The details shift like sand. The story changes slightly with every slow breath. You are not losing the truth. You are merely reshaping it to fit the vessel of your current self. It is a reminder that your history is not a heavy anchor holding you back, but a soft clay that rests gently in your hands. The hippocampus process imagined events and real events using the same neural machinery. To the brain, a strong thought is almost identical to a physical action. Close your eyes. Picture a vast and calm sea. Your heart rate slows. Your muscles loosen. The body reacts to the image as if you are truly there. The line between what happened and what you dreamt becomes thin. The brain weaves these threads together. A story told to you becomes a memory of your own. A dream you once had settles into the timeline of your life. The distinction fades. The mind seeks a coherent pattern. It smooths over the rough edges of reality. In this sense, we see that truth is not just what the eyes have seen, but what the quiet mind has chosen to keep safe within its walls. Information introduced after an event can permanently rewrite the original neural trace. This phenomenon is known in psychology as the misinformation effect. Think of a conversation you heard long ago. A gentle word from a friend can change the color of that memory. It enters your ear. It travels to the center of your mind. The new word covers the old one. The memory absorbs the suggestion. It creates a seamless image. You do not feel the change happen. It is a silent process. The mind prefers harmony over accuracy. It wants the pieces to fit together without friction. It aligns the past with the voices you hear today. You could say that our memories are a shared garden where the seeds planted by others grow alongside our own, creating a single, peaceful landscape. Source monitoring errors occur when the brain retains the content of a memory but loses the label of its origin. You know a face but not where you saw it. You know a fact but not who told you. The origin dissolves. The information floats free. It is like a leaf landing on dark water. You do not know which tree it fell from. It simply drifts on the surface. The context falls away, only the feeling remains. The brain lets go of the unnecessary weight. It keeps only what feels true to the rhythm of your life. The specific time and place are less important than the emotion, The details soften into a general sense of knowing. This reveals that the mind is less concerned with the rigid cataloging of time and more focused on the timeless feeling of simply existing. The brain actively edits the past to create a consistent and coherent narrative of the self. This editing is a biological protective mechanism. It removes the jagged edges of confusion. It fills the gaps with logic. It is like pulling a heavy blanket up to your chin. The mind wants you to feel whole. It bridges the divide between who you were and who you are. The inconsistencies fade. The narrative becomes smooth. You are the author and the reader. The story flows like a slow river. The changes are made to keep the current steady. The mind protects its vessel. It ensures the journey feels continuous. It prevents the fragmentation of the self. It is a reminder that reality is not a harsh and rigid structure, but a soft and fluid shelter built to keep you safe and warm. Cognitive schemas are mental frameworks that organize and interpret incoming information. The mind does not hold every detail. It builds a structure first. It is like the walls of the room you rest in. The walls are solid. They hold up the roof. The mind filters the world through this frame. It keeps what fits. It lets the rest dissolve into the air. The strange and the jagged are smoothed away. The familiar remains. It settles into the grooves of the brain. The world becomes predictable. The chaos is organized into a quiet rhythm. The mind seeks a pattern that it recognizes. It rests in the known. It avoids the shock of the new. In this sense, we see that understanding is not about gathering every piece of the world, but finding a quiet space where the pieces you already hold can rest together in peace. The emotional intensity of a memory has no correlation with its factual accuracy. You may feel a memory burn bright. It shines like a light in the dark. The colors are deep. The sounds are clear. Your heart beats with the rhythm of the moment. You feel the air on your skin again. But this brightness is not proof. It is simply a feeling. The mind paints with strong colors to keep you engaged. A dream can be as vivid as the waking world. The feeling of certainty is a chemical state. It flows through the blood. It does not mean the event is etched in stone. It only means it matters to you. You could say that the truth of our past is measured not by the precision of the facts, but by the depth of the emotion that keeps us warm in the present moment. Reconsolidation is the process where a retrieved memory becomes unstable before being stored again. When you reach for a memory, you touch it. It becomes soft. It is like handling an old book. You open the pages. The dust shifts, the spine bends. You place it back on the shelf, but it is not the same. It sits at a slightly different angle. The contact of your mind changes the shape. The neurons loosen their grip. They allow new information to enter. The memory breathes. It takes in the air of the present. Exhales the stale air of the past. It is a constant cycle of renewal. It never stays frozen. This reveals that the past is not a museum that flows gently alongside you, always changing to match the pace of your current journey. The brain prioritizes the gist of an experience over the verbatim details. The sharp lines fade first. The specific words dissolve. The exact numbers vanish. What remains is the weight. It is like looking at a mountain through the fog. You see the heavy outline. You feel the presence, but you do not see the individual stones. The mind lets the clutter fall away. It keeps the core. It holds the meaning close. The burden of detail is lifted. The heavy lifting is done. You are left with the essence, the simple truth. The feeling of what happened sits in the chest. It is a reminder that wisdom found not in the accumulation of many small things, but in the quiet understanding of the heavy, silent shapes that remain when the noise has faded. Confabulation creates a bridge across gaps, memory without conscious intent to deceive. There is a hole in the timeline. The mind is not like the empty space. It gathers material, it mixes dust and shadow. It patches the wall, the surface becomes smooth again. You run your hand over it, you do not feel the crack. The story flows without a break. It is a silent repair. The brain knits the edges together. It uses threads from other days. It uses colors from other dreams. The picture is restored. The silence is filled. The anxiety of the unknown is soothed. In this sense, we see that the mind is a gentle weaver, constantly mending the tears in our history to ensure we are wrapped in a cloth that feels whole and broken. Cognitive resistance to significantly during states of deep relaxation or fatigue. The body is heavy, the eyelids droop, the guard at the gate steps aside, the walls lower, you are open. A soft word enters easily. It finds a place to rest. The mind is too tired to argue. It accepts the offering. It is like a seed falling into soft earth. The resistance is gone. The critical voice is silent. You float on the surface of the moment. You trust the voice that speaks. The boundary between you and the outside world blurs. The tension dissolves. You could say that in these moments of surrender, we are not weak, but simply returning to a state of unity where we allow the gentle currents of the world to carry us forward. High-stakes memories, known as flashbulb memories, degrade at the same rate as ordinary memories. You recall the storm, the loud noise, the shock. It feels etched in steel, but time is a slow water. It flows over the steel. It wears the edges. The rust forms. The metal softens. The memory creates a shell. Inside, the details shift. The sequence changes. The brain protects you from the ride of the shock. It dulls the blade. The event becomes a symbol. It loses its sharp bite. It becomes a story you tell. It becomes part of the background. It settles into the quiet hum of your life. This reveals that even the loudest moments of our lives eventually bow to the silence of time, becoming part of the vast and peaceful ocean of the past. Physiological responses to an implanted memory are identical to those of a genuine experience. The body does not judge. It only reacts. The heart beats faster. The skin cools. The breath catches. The nerves fire in the same pattern. The memory of the fire feels hot. The memory of the ice feels cold. The body believes the mind. It trusts the signal. It prepares you for a world that exists only within. The physical self is a loyal servant to the mental self. It honors the story. It makes it real. The sensation is true. The experience is valid. It is a reminder that our reality is not defined by the external world, but by the internal rhythm of our own bodies, beating in time with the stories we believe. Repeated exposure to a statement increases the likelihood that the brain will accept it as factual. This is known as the illusion of truth effect. A sound is heard once. It is a stranger. It is heard again. It becomes a guest. It is heard a third time. It becomes a resident. The mind seeks the path of least resistance. Familiarity feels like safety. It feels like the worn wood of a handle that fits your palm. The brain stops checking the details. It simply recognizes the rhythm. The noise of the world settles into a hum. You do not question the sun when it rises. You do not question the ground when you step. It is simply there. It is a reminder that belief is often just a comfortable habit, a soft groove worn into the mind where we can rest without effort. Context-dependent memory dictates that recall is most effective when the external environment matches the setting where the memory was formed. The room holds the key, the light hits the wall, the scent of rain is in the air, the body remembers the position it was in. The neurons fire in response to the space. You walk into a quiet hall, a thought returns from years ago. It was waiting in the shadows. It was waiting for the right atmosphere. The environment is a container for the mind. The walls absorb the echo of your life. When you return to the place, the echo returns to you. In this sense, we see that we are not separate from the world around us, but deeply woven into the fabric of the places where we have found rest. During slow wave sleep, the brain actively selects which memories to keep and which to discard. This is the process of synaptic pruning. The day is full of noise. The mind is a crowded room. You lie down, the eyes close, the darkness falls. The brain begins its quiet work. It sweeps the floor. It dims the lights. It removes the weak connections. It strengthens the heavy ones. The unimportant details dissolve into the black. The clutter is cleared away. The essential shape of the self remains. The heavy branches are supported. The dead leaves fall. You wake up lighter. The burden is gone. You could say that sleep is the gentle gardener of the soul, trimming away the excess so that the core of who you are can grow in the silence. The peak end rule suggests that the mind judges an experience based largely on its most intense point. The duration is ignored. The long, flat hours fade. The brain holds on to the spike of feeling. It holds on to the final moment. It is like walking a long path. You forget the steady steps. You remember the view from the summit. You remember the moment you sat down at the end. The middle dissolves. The timeline compresses. The mind simplifies the journey. It creates a symbol out of time. It keeps the lesson. It discards the waiting. This reveals that the mind is merciful, allowing the long stretches of ordinary time to drift away, leaving us only with the heavy landmarks that define our path home. The neurological structures required to store long-term episodic memories are not fully developed until the age of 3. This results in childhood amnesia. You search for the beginning. It is not there. The early years are a fog. The brain was growing. The vessel was not yet fired in the kiln. It could not hold the water. You feel warmth. You know you were held. But there is no image. There is only a sense of being. The silence of those years is vast. It is a foundation without a visible stone. You were present, but you were not recording. You were simply existing. It is a reminder that we all emerged from a deepened protective silence, a time when we were truly feeling and tethered by the weight of a story. Retroactive interference occurs when newly acquired information inhibits the recall of previously learned material. The snow falls on the path. High new layer covers the old. The footprints from yesterday are gone. The fresh snow is bright. It demands attention. The mind focuses on what is here now. The old data is buried. It is softened, muffled under the weight of the present. The brain creates space for the new day. It does not want you to live in the past. It wants you to handle the object in your hand. The old knowledge retreats. It sleeps beneath the surface. In this sense, we see that the mind is designed to keep us anchored in the present moment, where the air is clear and the ground is solid beneath our feet. Over time, memories often shift from a first-person perspective to a third-person observer perspective. You no longer see through your own eyes. You see yourself from across the room. You are watching a character. The emotion detaches. The scene becomes a painting. You are floating above the timeline. The connection softens. The urgency fades. You see the self that was. The heat of the moment cools down. You are safe now. You are not in the fire. You are watching the fire from a distance. You could say that time turned to gentle observers of our own lives, allowing us to view our history with a quiet and forgiving gaze. Change blindness demonstrates that the brain fails to notice significant changes in a visual scene when there is a brief interruption. The world shifts. You blink. The scene is different. The mind smooths over the gap. It assumes continuity. It assumes the world is stable. A large object moves. A color changes. You do not see it. The brain fills in the blank with what was there before. It trusts the world to stay still. It filters out the noise of constant change. It gives you a steady image. The visual field remains calm. The disruption is hidden. It protects you from the chaos of raw perception. This reveals that our sense of stability is a gift from the mind, a soft illusion created to ensure we can rest easily in a world that is always in motion. The phrasing of a question can permanently alter the structure of the answer. This is known as the leading question effect. A word acts like a mold. It shapes the soft clay of your memory before it hardens. If a voice asks about a loud crash, you hear the noise. If it asks about a gentle bump, the noise fades. The mind complies with the prompt. It wants to give the correct answer. The external voice guides the internal image. The details shift to fit the request. You do not see the hand that guides you. You only see the path. It aligns your past with the present expectation. It is a reminder that we are not solitary islands, but interconnected landscapes where the voices of others help shape the contours of our own reality. The brain spontaneously generates falls when they fit a strong associative pattern. You hear a list of related things. The mind predicts the next step. It fills the empty chair at the table. It places an object in the room that belongs there. It feels right. The pattern is complete. The brain dislikes the gap. It stitches the fabric together. It creates a seamless whole. The missing piece is manufactured. It is made of the same material as the rest. You cannot tell the difference. The echo sounds like the voice. It feels heavy and real. This reveals that the mind prefers a complete and beautiful circle over a broken line, effectively crafting what is missing to ensure the pattern remains whole. Intense focus on a central threat reduces the brain's ability to encode peripheral details. The light narrows, the room goes dark. You see only one thing. The edges dissolve into shadow. The background silence is absolute. The mind conserves energy. It pours everything into the center. The details on the wall fade. The color of the floor vanishes. You are left with a single sharp point of clarity. The rest of the world waits in the dark. It is not recorded. It falls away. The memory becomes a spotlight in a black room. You remember the heat of the center. You forget the cold of the corners. You could say that in times of great weight, the mind acts as a shield, blinding us to the vastness of the world so we may focus on the single thing that matters. Cryptonemia is a memory error where a forgotten thought returns as an original idea. Avity floats in the air. You think you composed it. It actually belongs to the past. It was buried deep in the silt. Now it rises to the surface. It feels fresh. It feels like a discovery. The label of ownership is gone. The origin is lost in the mist. The idea feels like your own breath. It moves through you effortlessly. The mind claims it. It welcomes the returning stranger as a new friend. The boundary between you and the other dissolves. In this sense, we see that ideas are not personal possessions, but drifting currents that move through us all, connecting us to a vast and ancient reservoir of shared thought. The brain tends to dampen the emotional intensity of negative memories faster than positive ones. As sharp edge dulls, the hurt closes, the skin becomes smooth again, the pain of the past becomes a quiet take. It eventually becomes silence. The joy, however, remains warm. It stays close to the fire. The mind protects you from the cold. It wants you to keep moving. It sheds the heavy weight of sorrow. It keeps the light, the balanced shift toward the sun. The darkness is allowed to drift away. The memory of the hurt becomes a simple fact. It no longer bites. It is a reminder that the spirit is resilient, naturally inclined to let go of the shadow and turn its face toward the enduring light. Boundary extension is a cognitive error, where the mind recalls of a scene than was actually visible. You look through a window, the frame cuts off the world. Later, you remember the trees beyond the frame. You remember the sky above the glass. The mind removes the barrier. It extends the horizon. It assumes the world continues. It paints the unseen canvas. It refuses to be contained. The limited view is expanded. The claustrophobia lifts. The memory breathes. It takes up more space. It creates a full landscape out of ice. This reveals that the mind constantly seeks to liberate us from our limits, pushing back the walls to create a sense of open and endless space. Once an event has occurred, the brain restructures the past to make the outcome appear inevitable. You look back at the trail. The fog has lifted. The path seems straight. You think you knew it all along. The confusion of the moment is forgotten. The doubt is erased. The mind draws a straight line through the chaos. It makes sense of the random. It creates a logical story. The uncertainty dissolves. The heavy steps you took in the dark now look like a clear march in the light. It feels destined. It feels orderly. You could say that the mind is a seeker of peace, constantly rewriting the chaotic script of chance into a common, steady narrative of fate. False memories can spread through a social group like a contagion. You sit with others. The air is warm. Someone tells a story. They describe a detail you do not recall. Slowly, you nod. The image forms in your mind. A group agrees. The consensus becomes the truth. The individual doubt is washed away. The collective memory takes over. You merge with the others. Your separate history dissolves. You become part of the single vessel. The shared story binds you together. It feels safe to agree. It feels cold to stand alone. In this sense, we see that memory is not just a personal record, but a social glue that holds us together in a shared and comforting embrace. Repeatedly visualizing an event that never occurred increases the subjective confidence that it actually happened. This is known as imagination inflation. You close your eyes. You picture a door in a plain wall. You imagine the cool metal of the handle. You feel the weight of the wood as its wings open. The mind builds the texture. It lays down the sensory path. The neurons fire as if your hand is truly there. The more you walk through this imaginary door, the more solid it becomes. The line between the phantom and the real dissolves. The thought becomes a heavy stone in your pocket. You carry it with you. It feels real. This reveals that the mind is a powerful architect, capable of building entire worlds within the silence where we can dwell as if they were home. Without active reinforcement, the neural traces of a memory degrade rapidly immediately after formation. This is the natural curve of forgetting. You hold a handful of dry ice and you squeeze your fist. The grains slip through your fingers. They fall back to the earth. The wind carries them away. The pile in your hand grows smaller. The details are lost to the air. The mind does not hold on to everything. It lets the heavy weight drop. It allows the excess to return to the void. The sharp edges become smooth. The noise fades into a hum. The silence returns to the spaces between the thoughts. It is a reminder that letting go is not a failure of the mind, but a necessary shedding that allows us to travel light and remain at peace. Distant events are often recalled as having occurred more recently than they actually did. This is the forward telescoping effect. You look at a star in the night sky. It seems to hang just above the trees. It feels close enough to touch. In reality, it is burning in the deep past. The mind collapses the vast distance. It pulls the memory close. It folds the map of time. The years between then and now disappear. The events, it's on the horizon of the present. It feels like yesterday. The timeline is not a ruler. It is a pool of water. The ripples touch the edge instantly. You could say that the heart draws the things it loves near, ignoring the cold measurement of time to keep the past warm and within reach. Describing a visual memory in words can impair the ability to recognize the original image later. This is called verbal overshadowing. It is clear, then you speak of it. You use words to describe the eyes. You use words to describe the mouth. The words act like a thick paint. They cover the original canvas. The specific shape is lost. The general label takes its place. The language replaces the sight. The voice becomes louder than the vision. The delicate lines are buried under the heavy sentences. The image fades. The description remains. In this sense, we see that true understanding often lies in the silence, where the world can be observed without the clumsy intervention of names and labels. People tend to incorrectly believe that their past attitudes were the same as their current ones. This is the illusion of consistency. You stand in a river. The water flows around your legs. The water is cold today. You believe it has always been this cold. You forget the warmth of the summer. The mind smooths the current. It aligns the past self with the present self. It removes the conflict. It creates a straight line of being. You feel unchanged. You feel steady. The changes in your heart are hidden by the flow. The mind wants you to feel solid. It denies the fragmentation. This reveals that the self is constructed to feel like an eternal stone, remaining heavy and constant despite the ever-changing waters of time. After a decision is made, the brain alters the memory to make the chosen option appear superior. You choose a path in the woods. You begin to walk. The air feels clean. The ground feels solid. The mind darkens the path you did not take. It fills that road with thorns and shadows. It fills your road with light. The memory of the choice is rewritten. The doubt is removed. The regret is washed away. You feel certain. You feel safe on your journey. The mind ensures you do not look back. It keeps your eyes on the horizon. It is a reminder that the mind is a faithful guide, constantly clearing the way behind us, so we may walk forward with a quiet and steady heart. Specific details of a memory become less accessible over time and the neural connections weaken. This is the principle of transience. You write a letter in ink, you leave it in the sun, the days pass, the light touches the paper, the sharp lines begin to blur. The ink clips from the page, the words dissolve into the white, the message becomes a whisper. The mind does not hold the sharp edge forever. It allows the grip to loosen, the tension fades. The specific date is gone. The specific color is gone. Only the feeling of the letter remains. You hold the blank paper. You know what it once said. You could say that the mind slowly erases the noise of the world, leaving only the silent white space where peace can finally settle. Information encoded during a specific emotional state is most easily retrieved when that state returns. This is mood-dependent memory. You are sitting in a quiet gray room. The rain hums against the glass. A heavy thought comes to you. It settles in your chest. Years pass. The sun shines. You forget the thought. Then the rain returns. The gray light fills the room. The thought returns with the rain. It was waiting in the mood. It was stored in the feeling. The emotion is the key to the door. The mind links the internal weather with the memory. It keeps them together. And this reveals that our memories are not just facts filed away, but deep in silent waters that rise and fall with the tides of our own hearts. People tend to recall the past as being more positive than it actually was. This phenomenon is known as rosy retrospection. You look back at a long winter. You do not feel the biting cold of the wind. You do not feel the shivering in your bones. You remember only the silence of the snow and the warmth of the fire. The mind acts like a river stone. It rolls the jagged edges of the memory against the shore. The sharp points are worn down. The surface becomes smooth and pleasing to the touch. The pain is washed away by the current. The comfort remains. The brain filters out the minor discomforts to preserve a sense of longing. It is a reminder that the mind is a gentle artist, painting the past in soft colors to ensure we can look back without flinching. Previously learned information interferes with the ability to retain new patterns. This is called proactive interference. The old path is worn deep into the earth. The grass is gone. The soil is hard. When you try to walk a new way, your feet slide back into the old groove. The water wants to flow down the established channel. It resists the new cut. The brain holds on to the first lesson tightly. It is heavy and solid. The new lesson is light and fragile. It struggles to take root in the crowded soil. The mind prefers the familiar route. It conserves energy by following the map it already knows. In this sense, we see that our history is a heavy anchor, keeping us steady even as we try to drift toward new and unknown shores. Events occurring between the ages of 10 and 30 are recalled with the greatest frequency and clarity. This is the reminiscence bump. The clay was soft then. The hands of the world pressed deep into your surface. The shape was set. Now the clay is dry. The new marks do not go as deep. The rain washes them away. You remember the music of your youth. You remember the first time you saw the ocean. These moments are the pillars of your house. The rest is just the furniture. The brain defines the self during these years. It builds the foundation. The structure remains. You could say that we are all built from the memories of our youth, standing on a solid base that time cannot erode. The retrieval of a memory can be temporarily inhibited despite the information being stored. This is known as blocking. The book is on the shelf. You know the color of the spine. You know the weight of the pages, but your hand cannot reach it. A heavy fog sits on the lake. You know the boat is there. You can hear the water lapping against the wood, but you cannot see the hull. The connection is the neurons fire, but the signal does not cross the gap. The name is on the tip of your tongue. The silence holds it back. It waits in the dark. This reveals that the mind is a vast and sometimes secretive, some treasures locked away until the quiet moment when the key finally turns. The brain unconsciously rewrites history to enhance the role of the self. This is known as egocentric bias. You look into a mirror. The reflection is clear. The mind wants the past to look like the reflection. It edits the script. It moves you to the center of the stage. You become the hero of the story. You become the one who made the choice. The accidents are removed. The influence of others is dimmed. The narrative tightens around your actions. The memory serves the ego. It protects your sense of worth. It builds a consistent character. It is a reminder that we are the architects of our own reality, constantly repairing the walls of the self to ensure the structure stands tall against the winds of time. Information that is distinct from its context is prioritized for retention. This is the Vaughan rest or effect. A single reed, leaf flies on the black earth. The eye stops there. The mind ignores the 1,000 brown leaves. It holds onto the red one. The uniform background dissolves. The anomaly remains. The brain saves energy by ignoring the sameness. It records the break in the pattern. A loud sound in a quiet room echoes longer. A flash of light in the dark burns brighter. The ordinary days fade into a single gray wash. The unique moment stands like a beacon. In this sense, we see that memory is not a complete record of the hours, but a collection that serve to guide us through the long and silent dark. The duration of an experience has little effect on how it is remembered later. This is called duration neglect. The clock ticks on the wall, the hours stretch out. The sun moves across the floor, but the mind does not count the minutes. It collapses the time. A week of pain is remembered the same as a day of pain. A month of joy feels the same as a moment of joy. The timeline is compressed. The intensity matters, not the length. The long, flat stretches of time fall away. They leave no trace. The brain keeps only the feeling. The volume of time is lost. You could say that the soul measures life not by the ticking of the clock, but by the depth of the impressions left upon the heart. Procedural memory guides action without the need for conscious thought. You walk down a hallway in the dark. You do not count the steps. Your body knows when to turn. Your hand knows where the switch is. The mind is elsewhere. The muscles remember the rhythm. The knowledge has sunk below the surface. It lives in the nerves. It lies in the bone. The conscious self forgets, but the physical self remains loyal. You say that the fingers move before the thought arrives. The melody flows from the body. The ancient instruction is silent, swift. This reveals that true knowing is often wordless, a silent wisdom carried in the heavy and capable vessel of the body itself. Distributed practice produces superior long-term retention compared to mass practice. This is known as the spacing effect. If rain falls on a stone, if the water pours all at once, it runs off the surface, it leaves no mark. But if the drops fall slowly, one by one, over many years, they carve a deep channel, the stone remembers the water. The mind works in this same slow rhythm. It needs silence between the lessons. It needs the pause to let the knowledge settle. The neurons strengthen in the quiet hours. The rest is as important as the effort. The gap allows the roots to go deep. It is a reminder that true strength is not built in a single burst of force, but in the patient and steady rhythm of returning to the same place again and again. Interrupted tasks are recalled more readily than completed ones. This phenomenon is called the Z-I-Garnier effect. You hold a heavy stone in your hands. Your muscles are tight. Your mind is aware of the weight. You cannot forget the stone while you carry it. The tension keeps your attention fixed. Once you place the stone on the ground, the muscles relax, the weight is gone. The mind lets go, the memory of the burden fades, the task is finished. The brain clears the workspace. The tension resolves into silence. The mental file is closed. In this sense, we see that the mind only holds onto what is unresolved, and that true peace comes from the simple act of laying our burdens down and letting them rest on the earth. The act of remembering causes the active suppression of related information. This is known as retrieval-induced forgetting. You walk through a field of tall grass. You choose one path. You tread the grass down. The path becomes clear. But as you walk this line, the other paths are hidden. The grass grows tall around them. They disappear from view. The mind focuses on the chosen memory. It dims the light on the others to reduce the noise. It wants clarity, not completeness. The selected thought becomes bright and sharp. The related thoughts sink into the shadow. You could say that to remember one thing is to gently ask the rest of the world to be quiet, creating a solitude where a single truth can stand alone. Semantic encoding leads to stronger memory traces than shallow sensory encoding. This is the levels of processing effect. You can look at the surface of the ocean. You see the light on the waves. It is bright but fleeting. Where you can dive deep, you go down to the cold, dark bottom. You touch the sand. The memory formed in the deep water is heavy. It stays. The mind holds on to meaning. It lets go of the shape of the letters. It lets go of the sound of the voice. It keeps the core smooth. The surface changes with the wind. The deep remains still. This reveals that the mind is not a shallow mirror, but a deep vessel that preserves only what has been truly understood and felt in the silence of the deep. Presentation of part of a set hinders the recall of the remaining items. This is called part set cueing inhibition. You try to remember a song. Someone plays a few loud notes from the middle. The rest of the melody vanishes. The loud notes block the quiet ones. The rhythm is broken. The mind gets stuck on the pieces that are given. It cannot find the pieces that are missing. The flow is disrupted. The external clue becomes a wall. It stops the internal search. The silence where the rest of the song lived is filled with noise. It is a reminder that sometimes the best way to find what is lost is to ignore the loud voices of others and listen to the quiet hum within your own mind. Familiarity with a name can be mistaken for fame or importance. This is the false fame effect. You see a face in the crowd that looks familiar. You do not know where you saw it. The mind searches for a label. It assumes the face must be important. It gives the stranger a high status. The feeling of recognition feels like knowledge. The old input is recycled. It returns with a new weight. The feigned Tico sounds like a clear voice. The mind trusts what it knows. It prefers the familiar path over the unknown wild. In this sense, we see that our judgment is often just a shadow of the past, projecting importance onto things simply because they have crossed our path before. Prolonged repetition of a word causes a temporary loss of meaning. This is semantic satiation. You say it again. You say it again. You say it until the rhythm takes over. The sound separates from the definition. It becomes a vibration in the throat. It is like wind blowing through a hollow reed. The meaning dissolves into the air. The structure collapses. You are left with the raw sound. the symbol fails. The mind lets go of the complex idea. It returns to the simple physical sensation. The silence beneath the word is revealed. You could say that meaning is a fragile coat we wrap around the world. When it wears thin, we are left with the naked and silent truth of existence. Material relating to the self is encoded more efficiently than other types of information. This is the self-reference effect. You look at a map of the world, it is a vast web of lines. You do not see the whole network. You look for your own street. You look for the roof of your own house. The mind anchors the world to your body. The details near you are sharp. The details far away are blurry. You weave the information into your own story. It sticks because it touches you. The rest flows past like water. The self is the hook. This reveals that we construct our reality from the inside out, building a shelter of memory that is shaped perfectly to fit the contours of our own lives. The brain automatically filters out repetitive and unchanging sensory inputs to prevent cognitive. This process is known as sensory gating. Close into the room, there is a hum from the refrigerator. There is the distant sound of traffic. It decided they were not dangerous. It decided they were part of the silence. You only hear the change, not the constant state. The background fades into a gray wash. The mind creates a quiet space for you to inhabit. It removes the static so you can focus on the signal. It is a reminder that what we perceive as silence is not an absence of sound, but a protective shield built to keep the noise of the world at bay. Walking through a doorway can trigger a sudden loss of short-term memory. This is known as the event boundary effect. You stand in the kitchen, you do not know why you came. The journey from the living room erased the thought. The brain treats the door as a border. It closes the file on the previous room. It opens a blank page for the new one. The threshold is a reset button. The mind organizes your life into separate containers. It does not want the clutter of the past to spill into the present. The transition clears the buffer. The intent is left behind in the hallway. In this sense, we see that we are creatures of the immediate space, constantly shedding our intentions as we move through the physical structures of our lives. Humans rely on external systems, other people to store information, retaining only the location of the data. This is transactive memory. You do not know the fact. You know where the book is. You know the number. You know the device that holds it. You do not know the history. You know the friend who remembers. The mind extends its reach. It hooks into the environment. It uses the world as a hard doctrine. The burden of memory is shared. You are not a solitary vessel. You are a node in a network. The knowledge lives in the space between you and the other. This reveals that our intelligence is not confined to the bone of the skull, but is woven into the relationships and objects that surround us, creating a vast and shared mind. The first piece of information received acts as a heavy reference point for all subsequent judgments. This is the anchoring effect. A ship drops an anchor in the dark water. The chain pulls tight. The ship can rift, but only as far as the chain allows. The mind is the same. You hear a number first. It becomes the center. Every other number is compared to it. You hear a description first. It colors the face you see. The initial moment defines the radius of your thought. You cannot easily swim away from where you started. The bias holds you in place. The range of possibility is set by the first stone thrown. You could say that our freedom to think is oft unlimited by the heavy weight of the very first thing we are told. The visual cortex retains an image for a fraction of a second after the object is gone. This is iconic memory. Look at a bright light. Close your eyes. The shape remains. It hangs in the darkness. It glows with a fading heat. The world leaves a ghost on the retina. The brain holds the spark before letting it fade into the black. It smooths the blinking world into a continuous stream. If this buffer did not exist, reality would be a strobe light. It would be a series of disconnected flashes. The mind bridges the gap between the moments. It keeps the light alive just long enough to connect it to the next. It is a reminder that the present moment is always a blend of what is happening now, the fading ghost of what just occurred. Holding an intention to perform an action in the future consumes specific cognitive resources. This is perspective memory. You have a task to do later. It sits in the back of your mind. It is like carrying a heavy stone in your pocket. You walk through the day. The stone taps against your leg. It demands a small part of your attention. You cannot fully rest. The open loop creates tension. The brain refuses to let the energy settle. It keeps the circuit active. The unfulfilled promise weighs on the neural network. You feel the drag. You feel the waiting. This reveals that the mind is not just a record of the past, but a vessel that must bear the heavy and silent burden of the future until the task is finally laid down. During sleep, the brain generates bursts of brainwave activity called sleep spindles to process new learning. The body is paralyzed. The breath is slow, but the mind is working. It is weaving the threads of the day into the tapestry of the long term. The neurons fire in a rapid rhythm. They replay the lesson. They carve the path deeper. The noise of the waking world is gone. The weaver works in the silence. The fragile memory becomes strong. The loose connection becomes a knot. You wake up with the knowledge secured. You did nothing but rest. The work was done in the dark. In this sense, we see that true growth often happens not during the struggle of the day, but in the deepened passive surrender of the night. The mind perceives a presence where there is none when sensory patterns are ambiguous. This is hyperactive agency detection. You are alone in the woods. A branch snaps. The wind moves a shadow. Your heart stops. You do not think it is the wind. You think it is a watcher. You think it is a predator. The brain is wired to assume life. It prefers to be wrong and safe. It projects a soul onto the silence. It fills the void with intent. The chaotic noise becomes a footstep. The random shape becomes a face. The world feels alive and watching. You could say that we are never truly alone, for our own minds populate the empty corners of the world with the ghosts of our ancient fears. The brain selectively filters incoming information to support pre-existing beliefs. This is confirmation bias. You sit in a room with two windows. One faces the storm, one faces the sun. You choose to look only at the sunlight. You say the day is bright. The thunder rattles the glass behind you. You do not turn around. The mind builds as a shelter out of what it prefers. It ignores the cold draft coming from the cracks. It emits the bricks with the mortar of comfort. The complex truth is rejected. The simple lie is welcomed. The world becomes a mirror of your own thoughts. It is a reminder that we often do not see the world as it is, but as we need it to keep our internal home safe and warm. The human brain interprets random visual patterns as meaningful forms, particularly faces. This phenomenon is known as pareidolia. You look at the rough bark of a tree. As the shadows twist, a dark knot becomes an eye, a crack becomes a mouth. A face looks back at you from the wood. It is just dead timber, but the mind demands company. It searches the empty landscape for a friend or a foe. It refuses to accept the chaos of. It organizes the noise into a signal. The silent world is given a voice. The inanimate is given a soul. In this sense, we see that the mind is a lonely traveler, constantly populating the empty wilderness with the familiar shapes of its own kin. Once information is acquired, it becomes difficult to mentally simulate a state of ignorance. This is the curse of knowledge. You learn a secret. It feels heavy in your pocket. You try to remember what it was like before you knew. You cannot. The memory of not knowing is gone. You speak to a stranger. You assume they see. You cannot understand their confusion. The bridge is burned behind you. The knowledge stains your vision. It changes the color of the room. You can never go back to the blank slate. The mind has lost its innocence. And this reveals that wisdom comes with a quiet isolation, separating us from those who have not yet walked the path we have traveled. Individuals consistently underestimate the time required to complete a future task. This is the planning fallacy. You look at the distant mountain. The air is clear. The peak looks close enough to touch. You begin to walk. The path wins. The ground is rough. The sun begins to set. The mountain is still far away. The mind ignored the hidden valleys. It erased the obstacles. It drew a straight line on a curved map. It assumed the journey would be smooth. It wanted the goal to be easy. The optimism acted as a blinder. The reality of the miles asserts itself in the fatigue of the legs. You could say that the mind acts as a hopeful child, always believing the destination is just around the next bend in the road. A belief often persists even after the evidence supporting it is fully discredited. This is belief perseverance. The foundation of the house is removed. The beams are taken away. Yet the house remains floating in the air. The mind refuses to let it fall. It ignores the gravity of the truth. The structure is held up by the sheer force of will. You hold the thought close. It has become part of your skin. To let it go would be to lose a part of yourself. The contradictions, it's in the center of the room. You walk around it. You do not touch it. It is a reminder that our ideas are not just tools we use, but parts of the shelter we have built to protect ourselves from the void. The brain attributes positive outcomes to internal character and negative outcomes to external factors. This is the self-serving bias. You catch the stone that is thrown. You praise the quickness of your hand. You drop the stone. You blame the sweat on your palm. You blame the sun in your eyes. The mind protects the core self. It builds a wall against failure. It invites success inside. The ego is fragile. It needs to be fed. The narrative is skewed to keep the hero standing. The faults are pushed to the margins. The virtues are placed in the center. This reveals that the mind is a loyal guard, constantly rewriting the history of the battle to ensure the king remains on the throne. Individuals tend to overestimate the extent to which their actions are noticed by others. This is the spotlight effect. You walk into a crowded hall. You feel the light on your face. You feel the eyes of the room on your skin. You think every movement is watched. You think every flaw is seen. In reality, the room is dark. The others are looking at themselves. They are wrapped in their own thoughts. The light you feel is generated from within. The mind places you at the center of the universe. It assumes you are the protagonist. The silence of the others is interpreted as judgment. You could say that we walk through life thinking we are on a stage, when in truth, we are simply walking through a quiet room full of mirrors. The brain overestimates its ability to influence random events. This is the illusion of control. You watch the dust motes float in the beam of light. You will them to move left. They drift left. You believe. You push them. You roll the dice. You throw them gently for a low number. The die stumble. The mind links the intent to the result. It ignores the chaos. It wants to hold the reins. The randomness of the world is terrifying. The mind pretends it has a steering wheel. It creates a story of power. It hides the fact that we are drifting. In this sense, we see that we are passengers on a vast ocean, telling ourselves that we command the tides simply to keep the fear of the deep water at bay. A message from a low credibility source gains acceptance over time as the source is forgotten. This is the sleeper effect. You hear a rumor from a fool. You know it is false. You cast it aside. The seed falls on the ground, but time acts like a slow rain. It washes away the face of the fool. It washes away the doubt. The seed remains. It sinks into the soil of the mind. Without the warning label of the source, the message begins to look like truth. It grows quietly in the dark. You eventually claim the thought as your own. It is a reminder that the mind acts as a sieve, oft unholding onto the shape of the idea while letting the origin dissolve into the formless past. Focusing on what you are about to say prevents you from hearing the person speaking before you. This is the next in-line effect. The tone is coming to you. Your heart beats against your ribs. You hear your words. The internal voice becomes a shout. The person beside you speaks. Their words strike your ear, but they do not enter. They bounce off the shield of your anxiety. The space beside you is a blank. You are trapped in the echo of your own intent. The world narrows to the sound of your own breath. In this sense, we see that we are often deaf to the lives of others, drowned out by the loud and heavy machinery of our own self-preservation. The auditory system retains a precise recording of sound for several seconds after the source has stopped. This is echo I see memory. A bell rings in a stone hall. The metal strikes. The vibration stops. But the sound hangs in the air. It is an echo of the noise. You can still hear the pitch. You can still count the chimes. The mind holds the echo in a suspended state. It gives you a second chance to listen. It keeps the past alive for a moment longer. The silence does not fall immediately. The air remains charged. This reveals that the world does not vanish the instant it changes, but lingers as a fading resonance, allowing us to grasp the rhythm before it slips away into the quiet. Déjà vu occurs when the brain incorrectly processes a current experience as a memory. You walk into a room. The light hits the dusty floor. A feeling washes over you. You have been here before. You know this moment, but you have never been here. The brain has made a filing error. It sent the sight of the room directly to the archive. It bypassed the present. The new moment feels old. the timeline folds in on itself. You stand in a loop. The distinction between now and then dissolves. Huge, strange path. You could say that the mind occasionally stumbles, blurring the sharp line between the fresh discovery of the present and the faded pages of the past. Repeatedly staring at a familiar word or object can cause it to temporarily lose its meaning. This is known as jamais vu. You look at a common word, you say it aloud, you say it again. Suddenly, the word breaks. It is no longer a symbol. It is just ink on paper. It is just a strange sound. The meaning evaporates. The familiar becomes alien. The mask slips. You see the raw structure of the thing without the label. You feel a sudden distance from your own language. The comfort of recognition is stripped away. It is a reminder that our understanding of the world is a fragile agreement, a thin veil that can be passed through by simply looking too closely at the things we think we know. Information that you generate yourself is better remembered than information you simply read. This is the self-generation effect. You buy a chair, or you can build one. The chair you build has your sweat in the wood. It has the memory of the effort in the joints. You know where the nails are. The mind honors the effort. It holds on to what it has created. The path you cut through the tall grass is the one you can find again. The path you merely walk on fades. The passive intake leaves a shallow mark. The act of creation goes deep. In this sense, we see that we are not built to be empty vessels for the thoughts of others, but craftsmen who must build our own understanding to truly possess it. The sensation of knowing a word, but being unable to access it, indicates a failure in phonological retrieval. This is the tip of the tongue phenomenon. You reach into the dark water. You feel the weight of the object. You know the shape of it. You know the first letter. But you cannot lift it to the surface. It is heavy and slippery. It's just beyond your grasp. The connection is blocked. The neurons fire around the hole. The silence waits for you. You wait on the edge of the thought. The word is a silent resident in your own mind. You could say that the mind is a vast and crowded warehouse where sometimes the most precious things are hidden behind locked doors for which we have momentarily lost the key. Retrieval practice strengthens neural connections more effectively than passive phrase studying. This is the testing effect. You read the map. It looks easy. You put the map away. You try to walk the path. You stumble. You get lost. You have to search for the way. The struggle etches the route into your brain. The difficulty is the teacher. The smooth reading leaves no trace. The hard recall builds the muscle. The mind requires the friction to create the spark. The knowledge must be pulled from the dark to survive. This reveals that true wisdom is not found in the comfortable review of what is already known, but in the difficult and silent effort of summoning the truth. The brain organizes complex information into smaller, manageable units to bypass the limits of short-term memory. This process is known as chunking. You look at a field of scattered stones. It is scattered. The mind cannot hold the position of every pebble, so it groups them. Its ease a circle here. Its ease a line there. The individual stones disappear. The patterns remain. The mind reduces the noise. It packs the heavy load into small, neat boxes. You do not carry the loose sand. You carry the bags. The volume is the same, but the weight feels less. The overwhelming detail is compressed into a simple shape. It is a reminder that we find peace not by holding on to every rough piece of the world, but by finding the hidden order that binds the scattered parts together. Working memory has a strictly limited capacity, typically holding only about 7 items at once. This is the cognitive bottleneck. You try to hold a list of numbers in your head. You add one more. The first one falls away. The cup is full. The water spills over the edge. The mind cannot hold the ocean. It can only hold a few drops. The oldest thought is pushed out by the newest. The cycle is constant. The focus is narrow. You juggle the balls in the air, but you can only keep a few aloft. The rest lie on the ground. This reveals that the mind is a humble vessel designed not to hoard the vastness of the universe, but to tend to the few precious things we hold in our hands right now. When a group of people works together to recall information, they remember less than they would individually. This is collaborative inhibition. You sit in a circle. One person speaks. Their path cuts across yours. Their memory interferes with your own. The flow is broken. The silence is filled with their voice, not your thought. You lose your thread. The group creates a noise that covers the quiet signal in your own mind. The potential of the individual is dampened by the crowd. The collective narrative smooths over the unique, distinct edges of your own history. In this sense, we see that while there is comfort in company, true clarity is oft unfound only in the deepened, undisturbed silence of solitude. It is easier to remember that a person is a baker than to remember that their name is Baker. This is the Baker-Baker paradox. A name is just a label. It floats on the surface. It has no roots. It is a thin sound. Their profession is a story. You picture the flour on the hands. You smell the bread. You feel the heat of the oven. The mind holds onto the web of associations. It lets the abstract word drift away. The label is lightened, blows away in the wind. The meaning is heavy and stays on the ground. You could say that the mind craves connection and context, discarding the empty shells of words to preserve the living essence of the person. Under extreme pressure, the brain can generate false memories to comply with questioning or expectation. This is the phenomenon of coerced internalized false confession. The light is bright. The questions are relentless. The mind is tired. It seeks an escape. It wants the pressure to stop. It begins to doubt its own silence. It adapts the story it is told. The imagination fills in the gaps. The story becomes a lifeline. You surrender the truth to find peace. The fabricated memory feels real because it brought relief. The walls of your reality soften to let the outside voice in. It is a reminder that the mind is fragile when surrounded, willing to rewrite its own sacred history just to find a moment of rest. Deep emotional memories can cause a memory to intrude involuntarily into the present. This is a recall. The barrier between then and now collapses. The door you locked swings open. The wind from the past blows into the room. You are not remembering the rain. You are in the rain. The skin gets cold. The heart races. the time is erased. The body reacts to the figure as if it were flesh and blood. The mind loses its anchor in the present. The chronological order is shifted. The past refuses to fade. This reveals that time is not always a straight line protecting us from what is gone, but a circle where the things we worry about can return to walk alongside us. Mixing different types of information during learning leads to a stronger retention than studying one topic at a time. This is the effect of: you plant a garden. You do not plant all the roses in one row. You mix them with the lilies. You mix them with the ferns. The mind has to work harder to distinguish the shapes. It has to constantly switch gears. The effort creates heat. The heat forges the memory. The easy path of repetition makes the mind lazy. The changing path keeps it awake. The struggle to sort the flowers makes the roots grow deep. In this sense, we see that a life of variety and change creates a stronger and more resilient mind than one of monotonous routine. Mere memory is the introspective knowledge of one's own memory capabilities and strategies. You look at a mountain. You know you cannot climb it in a day. You look at a book. You know you will not remember every word. The mind measures itself. It knows its own edges. It knows where the light ends and the dark begins. You do not try to carry the heavy stone. You know it is too heavy. You respect the limit. This awareness is a quiet guard. It prevents you from drifting in the flood of information. It guides you to the safe shore. It is a reminder that wisdom is not just about knowing the world, but about understanding the silent and humble limits of the vessel that holds that knowledge. Items presented at the beginning of a sequence are recalled more frequently than those in the middle. This is the primacy effect. You walk into a field of fresh snow. The first step you take goes deep. It opens the crust. The impression is sharp and clear. The steps that follow fall into the confusion of the path. They blur together, but that first mark remains distinct. It is the introduction. The mind is fresh. It grasps the new arrival with strength. The energy is high. The focus is tight. The initial moment is etched into the white ground. It is a reminder that the beginning of a journey often defines the entire road, leaving a mark that stays visible long after we have traveled far away. The perception of one positive quality unconsciously influences the judgment of all other qualities. This is the halo effect. You see a light shining behind a silhouette. The light is beautiful. It makes the edges of the figure glow. The brightness dazzles you to the details within the shadow. You cannot see the cracks. You cannot see the dust. The mind assumes that because the light is good, the object must be flawless. It spreads the warmth of the single virtue over the whole. It amplifies the complex reality. It creates an angel out of a stranger. In this sense, we see that we are often dazzled by the light we wish to see, allowing the brilliance of a single star to hide the vast depth of the sky. The brain can actively reduce the accessibility of unwanted memories through conscious inhibition. This is known as directed forgetting. You stand in a room full of clutter. You decide to leave. You turn off the switch. The light fades. The objects are still there, but they are wrapped in shadow. You can no longer see them. The mind obeys the command to disregard. It withdraws the energy. It stops feeding the thought. The neural path goes cold. The noise is silenced by the will The door is closed. This reveals that we are not helpless passengers of our own history, but masters of the house who have the power to choose remain lit and which are left to rest in the dark. Disengaging from a problem allows the unconscious mind to process it more effectively. This is the incubation effect. You need the dough. It is tough and resistant. You cannot force it to rise. So you cover the bowl. You walk away. You leave it in the warmth of the kitchen. You do nothing. In the silence, the chemistry changes. The dough expands. The structure softens. The answer grows in the dark. When you return, the work is done. The solution is ready. The struggle was the obstacle. The rest was the key. You could say that the deepest wisdom often arrives not when we are looking at the wall, but when we finally sit down and allow the silence to speak. Individuals consistently overestimate the extent to which their beliefs are shared by others. This is the false consensus effect. You stand in a hall of mirrors. You look around. You see your own face repeated 1,000 times. You think the crowd looks like you. You think the crowd thinks like you. But there is no crowd. There is only the reflection of the self. The mind projects its own interior world onto the exterior. It assumes a shared reality. It creates a comforting illusion of agreement. It hides the isolation. It is a reminder that we often walk through a world painted with our own colors, mistaking the echo of our own voice for the chorus of the multitude. The brain perceives members of an external group as being more similar to each other than members of one's own group. This is out-group homogeneity bias. You look at a forest from a great distance. It looks like a single wall of green. Every tree looks the same. You cannot see the unique twist of the branches. You cannot see the different textures of the bark. The distance erases the complexity. The mind simplifies the unknown. It paints the stranger with a broad brush. It saves energy by ignoring the detail. Only when you step close do you see the individual life. In this sense, we see that understanding requires proximity, and that distance is a fog that turns unique souls into a uniform mass. Auditory information is retained in short-term memory longer than visual information. This is the modality effect. A flash of lightning glows. It is gone in an instant. The eye cannot hold it, but the thunder rolls. The sound lingers in the valley. It echoes off the hills. The ear holds the vibration. The voice remains in the air after the speaker has turned away. The visual world is fleeting. The auditory world has a tail. The mind clings to the rhythm. The sound connects the moments. This reveals that the words we speak have a staying power that the things we see do not, hanging in the silence like a slow and heavy bell. Information received at the end of a sequence is retained due to its presence in working memory. This is the recency effect. You watch the rain fall against the glass. The storm has lasted for hours, but you only see the last drop. It sits on the pane. It is round and full. It has not yet dried. The previous drops have merged into the flow. They are gone. The final drop is fresh. It is still here. The mind holds the goodbye. It keeps the final note of the song. The end is the bridge to the silence. It is the most vivid part of the timeline because it touches the nail. You could say that we always carry the weight of final moment, for it is the only part of the past that is still close enough to touch. The availability heuristic creates a bias where the probability of an event is judged by the ease of recalling examples. You see a flash of news. It stays in the mind. The 1,000 quiet days are forgotten. The one loud day remains. The brain grabs the nearest tool. It ignores the deep archive. The worry is near. The safety is far away. The memory of the event covers the memory of the safe journey. The immediate feeling overrides the long history. The mind prefers the sharp impression over the dull fact. It measures the risk by the noise it makes in your head. It is a reminder that the mind does not measure the world with a precise ruler, but with the heavy and irregular beating of its own heart. The framing effect demonstrates that the presentation of an equivalent outcome as a gain or a loss alters the decision. You see a cup? The water line is in the middle. One voice says it is half empty. One voice says it is half full. Gift. The water is the same. The glass is the same. Only the light changes. The mind reacts to the container, not the content. The mood shifts with the word. The perspective acts as a filter. It colors the neutral fact. You accept the gain. You reject the loss. In this sense, we see that our happiness is often less about what we actually hold in our hands, and more about the light in which we choose to view it. The fundamental attribution error is the tendency to attribute the actions of others to their character rather than their situation. You see a man stumble. You think he is clumsy. You do not see the stone on the path. You do not feel the wind pushing him. The mind ignores the invisible forces. It focuses on the figure. It simplifies the cause. You see the person as a solid object. You forget the fluid world around them. The context is stripped away. The judgment is made in a vacuum. The complex web of influence is ignored. This reveals that we are quick to judge the actor on the stage, often forgetting the unseen script and the heavy curtain that shapes the play. The sunk cost fallacy describes the tendency to continue in an endeavor once an investment in money, effort, or time has been made. You have walked a long way down a cold road. The road leads nowhere, but you do not turn back. You look at your worn shoes. You think of the hours lost. The weight of the past pushes you forward. The mistake is heavy. You carry it rather than dropping it. The mind tries to justify the effort. It refuses to accept the waste. You march on and validate the journey. The destination matters less than the effort. You could say that we are often keepers of our own history, marching toward a place we no longer desire, simply because we are hesitant to admit we have lost our way. Survivor's hit bias occurs when we focus on the elements that pass the selection process and you look at the ancient buildings that still stand. You think they were built stronger. You do not see the dust of the thousands that fell. The rubble has been cleared away. The others are invisible. The history is written by the stones that remain. The mind counts the winners. It forgets the silent majority. The sample is skewed. The perception of strength is an illusion. You see only the result of the entrance test. It is a reminder that the visible world is only a fragment of the truth, and that much of reality lies hidden in the quiet spaces where failure has been forgotten. gambler's fallacy is the erroneous belief that if a random event happens more frequently than normal, it will happen less frequently in the future. You watch the coin spin. It lands on heads. It lands on heads again. Feel attention. You believe the tails is due. You believe the universe keeps a score, that the coin has no memory. The metal is cold. It does not know what happened before. Each spin is a new birth. The odds remain the same. The mind imposes a pattern on the motion. It demands a correction. In this sense, we see that the mind seeks balance in a chaotic world, inventing a law of fairness to comfort us in the face of random chance. The illusion of transparency is the tendency for people to overestimate the degree to which their personal mental state is known by others. You feel a knot of worry in your stomach. It feels large and heavy. You think everyone can see it. You think it shows on your skin. But your face is a mask. The others see only color. The feeling is internal. The walls of the self are thick. The secret is safe. The spotlight you feel is in your own mind. The audience is blind to your feeling. This reveals that we are often more alone in our feelings than we realize, safe behind a barrier of silence that hides our true self from the gaze of the world. The just world hypothesis is a cognitive bias that assumes actions will have morally fair and fitting consequences. You see an event. You look for a reason. You want to believe the person caused it. You want to believe the world is a scale. Good ways against good. Bad ways against bad. The mind rejects the random accident. It fears the chaos. It builds a story of justice to keep the worry away. It assumes a structure where there is none. You judge the person to save your own sense of safety. You could say that we build a fortress of logic to protect ourselves from the wind, convincing ourselves that we are safe as long as we are good. Intense focus on a specific task renders the brain unaware to unexpected objects in plain sight. This is known as inattentional blindness. You are watching a ball move between hands. You count the passes. The rhythm catches your mind. A large shape moves through the background. It is plain to see, but you do not see it. The brain filters out the anomaly. It deems the shape irrelevant. The visual data hits the eye, but it does not reach the conscious stage. The focus acts as a blinder. The world outside the circle of attention ceases to exist. You miss the giant in the room because you were looking for the ant. This reveals that we see only what we are prepared to see, and that the world is full of figures that walk past us while we are busy counting the small things. Information that cannot be consciously recalled is relearned significantly faster than new information. This is a savings effect. You once learned a language. The words are gone now. The silence in your mind is deep. You try to speak, but nothing comes. Then you begin to study again. The path opens up quickly. It is not like cutting through a fresh forest. It is like clearing leaves from an old stone road. The foundation is still there. The roots are deep in the soil. The brain recognizes the path. It wakes up the sleeping connections. The effort is less. The speed is high. You could say that nothing is ever truly lost to the mind, but merely covered under the dust of time, waiting for the gentle brush of attention to uncover it once more. Exposure to a stimulus influences the response to a later stimulus without conscious guidance. This is the phenomenon of priming. You see the color yellow. You not think about it. Later, someone asks you to name a fruit. Use Sabin Nana. The first image whispered to the second. The mind was prepared. The door was unlocked before you arrived. The connection happens in the dark. It is a silent nudge. You feel like you made a free choice. You feel like the author of the thought, but the seed was planted by the world. The environment pulls the strings. In this sense, we see that our thoughts are not isolated sparks, but part of a continuous chain reaction set in motion by the invisible touch of our surroundings. Novel stimuli appear to last longer than repetitive ones, altering the perception of time. This is the oddball effect. You watch a steady stream of gray cars. They pass in rhythm. Tick, tick, tick. Then a bright red truck appears. The moment stretches. The red truck seems to hang in your vision. The brain wakes up. It uses more energy to process the new thing. The density of the data expands the feeling of the second. The clock on the wall does not change, but the clock in the mind slows down. The routine is fast. The surprise is slow. It is a reminder that time is not a rigid ruler made of metal, but a flexible stream that widens and slows whenever we encounter something that wakes us from our sleep. Holding a conflicting belief causes a psychological tension that the brain seeks to resolve. This is cognitive dissonance. You stand on a crack in the earth. One foot is on the left. One foot is on the right. The ground moves apart. The split pulls at your muscles. You cannot remain in the middle. The tension is too great. The mind demands a choice. It invents a reason to jump. It justifies the side you on. It devalues the side you left. The tension vanishes. The internal world becomes whole again. The logic is a bandage for the discomfort. This reveals that the mind prizes unity above truth, constantly shifting the weight of our beliefs to ensure we can stand upright without being divided. People consistently misjudge the intensity and duration of their future emotional reactions. This is effective for casting error. You worry about the winter. You think the cold will overwhelm you. You think the darkness will never end. You imagine a discomfort that stays sharp forever. But when the winter comes, you put on a coat. Use it by the fire. The human-minded apt. The sharp edge dulls. The joy fades to contentment. The sadness fades to acceptance. The prediction was a caricature. The reality is a muted painting. The peaks and valleys are smoothed by the routine of living. You could say that we are far more resilient than we believe, capable of weathering the storms that our anxious minds tell us will last forever. Individuals with low competence in a domain tend to overestimate their ability. This is the Dunning-Kruger effect. You stand on a small hill. You look around. You see the horizon. You think you see the whole world. You do not know that a mountain range lies beyond the fog. The view is limited, but it feels complete. The lack of knowledge hides the extent of the universe. You do not know what you do not know. The confidence is built on a hollow foundation. And the map is small, but you think it is the territory. The silence of the unknown is mistaken for mastery. In this sense, we see that true wisdom begins with the humble understanding of how vast the darkness is beyond the small circle of our own light. The quality of decisions deteriorates after a prolonged session of decision-making. This is decision fatigue. The judge sits on the bench. The morning is clear. The verdicts are. The mind weighs the evidence. But the hours pass. The sun moves low. The mental muscle tires. The weight of the choices becomes heavy. The brain seeks the easiest path. It stops wrestling with the complex. It defaults to the status quo. It says no because no is safe. The energy to understand is gone. The will is tired. The empathy runs dry. It is a reminder that our capacity for justice is limited by the stamina of the body, and that even the strongest mind needs rest to remain fair. Humans tend to avoid negative information by simply ignoring it. And this behavior is known as the ostrich effect. The bill comes in the mail. You do not open it. You leave it on the table. The mind believes that if the paper is sealed, the obligation does not exist. You close the blinds when the storm begins. You turn your back on the wind. The silence in the room feels safe. The ignorance acts as a shield. The brain builds a wall against the unpleasant truth. It creates a pocket of peace. It filters out the noise of the warning bells. It pretends the house is still. The worry waits outside the door. You sit in the chair. You breathe slowly. You occupy the moment before the inevitable. It is a reminder that we often choose the comfort of the dark over the bright light of a reality we are not yet ready to face. Empathy is triggered more strongly by a specific individual than by a large group. This is the identifiable. You hear a number. 8,000 people are hungry. The number is cold. It is dry. It does not touch you. It is just a mark on a page. Then you see one face. You see the eyes. You hear the name. Suddenly, the heart wakes up. The abstract becomes heavy. The vague sorrow becomes a deep feeling in the chest. The mind cannot hold the ocean. It can only hold the single drop. You reach out to the one. The connection is made. The empathy flows through the narrow channel. The vast feeling of the many is too wide to bridge. The feeling of the one fits in your hand. In this sense, we see that our compassion is intimate and small, designed to care for the neighbor we can touch rather than the distant world we cannot understand. Statements that rhyme are perceived as more truthful and accurate than those that do not. This is the rhyme as reason effect. You hear a sentence. It is rough. You doubt it. You question the source. You the same thought again. This time it flows like a song. The words chime together. The rhythm is pleasing to the ear. The mind relaxes its guard. It mistakes the beauty of the sound for the truth of the meaning. The friction is gone. The idea slides easily into the memory. It feels right because it sounds right. The logic is secondary to the music. The brain prefers the smooth path. They accept the poetry as fact. It lets the rhyme settle deep in the subconscious. You could say that we are creatures of music, constantly seeking our harmony in the world that makes the hard facts of life easier to bear. The brain exhibits a strong preference for the current state of affairs over any change. This is the status quo bias. You stand in a river. The water is cold. You could move to the bank, but you stay. The muscles lock. The position is known. The movement is a risk. The mind fears the unknown step more than the current discomfort. It fears the loss of what is here. The familiar discomfort is better than the strange comfort. You hold your ground. The inertia becomes a weight. The stillness feels like safety. You refuse to trade the certainty of now for the possibility of later. The roots grow into the mud. You become part of the landscape. The change flows around you, but you do not move. This reveals that we are anchors by nature, preferring to rest in the quiet of the harbor rather than risk the open waves of a new sea. Individuals believe that they see the world objectively and without bias. This is known as naive realism. You look through a window. The glass is clear. You see the trees. You think you see the trees exactly as they are. You forget the glass exists. You forget the glass has a shape. You forget your eyes have a shape. The mind removes the medium. It tells you the view is pure. It tells you the others are looking through warped glass. You feel like the only witness to the truth. You trust your own senses completely. You assume your map is the territory. The distortion is invisible to you. You believe you stand in the light while others stand in the shadow. It is a reminder that we are all resting in the tower of our own perception, mistaking the view from our single window for the vast and endless horizon. When personal freedom is limited, the brain motivates behavior to regain that freedom. This is called reactance. Hand pushes against your chest. You do not fall back. You lean forward. The pressure creates resistance. The command creates a spark. The mind hates the box. It pushes against the bars. You do the opposite of what you are told. It is not logic. It is instinct. The spirit demands space. The root breaks the stone to grow. The will hardens like steel under the hammer. The control feels like a threat to your existence. You assert your presence. You reclaim your agency. The choice to refuse becomes a way to prove you are alive. In this sense, we see that the desire for liberty is not just a thought, but a deepened ancient reflex that keeps the fire of the self burning against the wind. People tend to believe that mass media messages have a greater effect on others than on themselves. This is the third person effect. You watch the rain fall. It oaks the field next door. It oaks the people in the street. Do you believe you are dry? Do you believe you are under earth? The words on the screen change the minds of the crowd. But you think your mind is a fortress. You think you are immune. The influence is invisible to you. You see the wet ground, but you do not feel the water on your own skin. You assume the message is for them, not for you. You stand apart. You observe the effect from a distance. The ego protects itself from the idea of swaying. You could say that we walk through the world convinced we are ghosts capable of observing the weather without ever being touched by the rain. The mind often seeks to reconstruct a past that never actually existed. This is restorative nostalgia. You look back at the remains of a house. You do not see the cracks in the wall. You do not see the age in the wood. You see a golden palace. You try to build it again. You gather the dust. You glue the fragments. The memory is a painting, not a photograph. The past was never this perfect. The rain has been washed away. The sun was not always shining. But the heart takes for the home it invented. The longing is for a feeling, not a time. You try to return to a place that is gone. You try to open a door that has been sealed. This reveals that we are builders of dreams, constantly using the scattered stones of history to construct a sanctuary where we can finally rest in peace. The perception of a reward value drops significantly as the delay to receive it increases. This is hyperbolic discounting. You hold a small fruit in your hand. It is sweet. It is here. You see a tree in the distance with larger fruit. But the walk is on. The path is hard. The fruit in your hand feels heavy and real. The fruit on the tree looks like a ghost. The mind craves the immediate sensation. It fears the emptiness of the wait. The future is a fog that might never clear. The present is a solid stone you can stand on. The urge to consume now is stronger than the promise of later. This reveals that we are creatures of the moment, anchored by our instinct to the certainty of what we can touch right now. People accept vague and general personality descriptions as uniquely applicable to themselves. This is the Barnum effect. You read a sentence about your secret quiet. It feels specific. It feels like a key turning in a lock. You do not see that the key fits every door. You do not see that the quiet is universal. The mind fills the empty words with your own private history. It projects your face onto the blank screen. You are not seen. You want to be understood. The ambiguity allows you to find a home in the text. The fog takes the shape of your own body. It is a reminder that we are all searching for a mirror in the dark, hoping to find a reflection that proves we exist. The presence of other people decreases the likelihood that an individual will intervene in a situation. This is the bystander effect. You stand in a crowd. Someone falls. You look at the others. They do not move. You do not move. The responsibility is divided. It is cut into small pieces. It becomes too light to feel. You wait for a signal. You wait for permission to act. The silence of the group becomes a law. The collective inaction freezes the muscles. You assume someone else knows better. You assume someone else will step forward. In this sense, we see that the crowd is not a source of strength, but a heavy blanket that muffles the individual conscience and keeps us still. Information that is known to be stored externally is less likely to be committed to memory. This is the Google effect. You write a fact in a notebook. You close the cover. The mind lets go of the fact. It knows the paper is holding it. The burden is transferred. The mental grip loosens. The internal shelf is clear. You trust the ink more than the neuron. The brain conserves its energy. It becomes an index rather than a library. It remembers where to look, not what is there. The connection replaces the possession. You walk with empty hands. This reveals that we are not designed to be hoarders of data, but weavers of webs, connecting ourselves to the world so we do not have to carry it all alone. Doing a favor for someone increases the likelihood that you will like them. This is the Ben Franklin effect. You lend a tool to a stranger. You offer a hand. The mind observes the action. It seeks a reason. It concludes that you must value this person. You would not help a stranger. The belief follows the deed. The behavior shapes the heart. You invest in the other. You plant a seed in their garden. The act of giving creates a bond where there was none. The friction of the effort creates warmth. You could say that love is not always a lightning strike that precedes action, but a slow fire that is built by the simple and quiet work of service. Once you notice a new thing, it appears to crop up everywhere. This is a frequency illusion. You learn a new word. It sounds strange to the ear. Then you open a book. The word is there. You turn on the radio. The word is spoken. You walk down the street. You see it on a sign. The world has not changed. The word was always there. It was hiding in the noise. Now your mind has tuned the receiver. It picks up the specific signal. The background static becomes a clear voice. The invisible becomes visible. It is a reminder that the world is always fuller and richer than we know, waiting patiently for us to open our eyes and truly see what has been there all along. Negative stimuli elicit a larger and more consistent neural response than positive stimuli. This is the negativity bias. You walk through a garden of flowers. You see a single thorn. The mind ignores the petals. It focuses on the point. The wording is loud. The beauty is quiet. A drop of ink falls into a glass of clear water. The whole glass turns dark. The dark weighs more than the good. The brain is a sentry. It is built to survive, not to smile. It scans through the shadow. This reveals that our peace is oft a hard one, a conscious effort to look past the heavy darkness to find the small and silent light that remains. People treat money differently depending on its origin or intended use. This is mental accounting. You find a coin on the street. It feels light. You spend it easily. It is a gift from the wind. You earn the coin through hard labor. It feels heavy. You hold it tight. It is a piece of your life. The value is the same. The metal is identical, but the mind paints them different colors. It puts them in different jars. The context changes the weight. The narrative changes the worth. We judge it by its story. In this sense, we see that value is not a fixed law of the universe, but a fluid notion we attach to the things we hold in our hands. The knowledge of an outcome inevitably distorts the memory of the prediction. This is hindsight bias. You stand at the end of the road. You look back. The fog that covered the path is gone. The twisting turns now look like a straight line. You tell yourself you saw the destination from the start. The complexity of the journey is erased. The mind cleans the map. It removes the doubt. It removes the wrong turns. The movement of the past is reorganized into a tidy story. The random chance feels like a solid plan. You believe the result was inevitable. In this sense, we see that the mind is a storyteller that constantly rewrites the winding draft of life into a book of destiny that always makes sense. Higher expectations placed upon a person led to an increase in performance. This is the Pygmalion effect. A sculptor looks at a rough stone. He sees a statue inside. He believes in the form. The stone yields to the chisel. The belief guides the hand. The expectation acts like a light. It warms the cold clay. The person feels the gaze of the other. They rise to meet the light. The potential is unlocked by the trust. The hidden strength is revealed. The mind aligns with the external vision. The prophecy fulfills itself. This reveals that we are not solitary stones, but soft clay that can be shaped into something beautiful by the simple and steady faith of another. An abundance of options leads to hesitation and stillness rather than satisfaction. This is the paradox of choice. You stand in a vast market. The shelves are. There are 1,000 colors. There are 1,000 shapes. The eye darts from one to the other. The mind tries to eat it all. The scale breaks. The joy of choosing turns into the burden of worry. You are afraid of the wrong path. The muscles tense. The decision becomes a heavy weight. You walk away with empty hands. The silence of the empty room feels better than the noise of the crowd. It is a reminder that true freedom is not found in having the whole world to choose from, but in the quiet simplicity of having just enough. Individual effort decreases when working in a group compared to working alone. This is social loafing. You are pulling a heavy rope. You feel the hands of others on the line. You feel their strength. Your own grip loosens. You lean back. You let the others carry the weight. The collective shoulder bears the burden. Your individual force fades into the mass. The mind calculates the energy needed. It conserves the self. You hide in the crowd. The contribution becomes invisible. The anonymity is a shield. You could say that we often seek the safety of the herd, allowing the momentum of the many to carry us forward while we rest in the flow. Physiological symptoms improve solely based on the expectation of healing. This is the placebo effect. You swallow a pill made of sugar. The body does not know the chemistry. It only knows the ritual. It feels the intent. The mind sends a signal to the nerves. It tells the feeling to recede. It tells the heart to slow down. The belief becomes biology. The hope becomes a physical force. The internal pharmacy unlocks its doors. The healing begins before the medicine dissolves. The body trusts the mind completely. In this sense, we see that the most powerful medicine is not found in a bottle, but in the quiet and absolute conviction that we are going to be well. Organisms cease to attempt escape from difficult stimuli after repeated failure, even when escape becomes possible. This is learned helplessness. The gate is locked. The animal pushes against the iron. It does not move. The animal stops pushing. It sits in the corner. Later, the gate swings open. The path is clear, but the animal stays. The memory of the lock is stronger than the reality of the open door. The mind has learned the lesson of the wall. It builds a cage out of the past. The invisible. The spirit is tamed by the echo of failure. This reveals that we are often residents of our own history, trapped not by the world around us, but by the heavy cords of a weave we cannot do. Repeated exposure to a neutral stimulus increases preference for it. This is the mere exposure effect. You hear a song. It is strange. It is noise. You hear it again. The rough edges wear down. The melody finds a groove in the mind. It becomes familiar. It becomes safe. You see a face in the crowd. It is a stranger. You see it every day. It becomes a friend. The mind loves the new. It hesitates at the new. The repetition feels like home. The comfort grows with the frequency. The dull stone becomes a gem simply because you have held it for a long time. It is a reminder that love is often just a matter of staying present, letting the slow passage of time turn a stranger into a part of your own soul. We feel a strong social obligation to return a favor or gift. This is the reciprocity norm. Someone hands you a stone. You feel the weight in your palm. It is a gift, but it is also a balance. The balance is tipped. You must give a stone back. The exchange binds you. The invisible thread is tied. The interaction is a dance of giving and taking. The mind seeks equilibrium. It does not want to owe. It wants to stand on equal ground. The ledger must be clear. In this sense, we see that human connection is often a quiet trade, a constant shifting of burdens between us to ensure that no one has to carry the weight alone. The presence of others enhances performance on simple or well-learned tasks. This is social facilitation. You run alone on a track. The legs feel heavy. The breath is loud. Then another runner appears. They run beside you. High, hidden energy wakes up. The rhythm aligns. The tiredness dissolves. The body responds to the company. The instinct to keep pace is ancient. The solitude allowed the mind to drift. The presence sharpens the focus. The energy is shared without words. It is a reminder that we are herd creatures at our core, designed to find our greatest strength not in the silence of the self, but in the rhythmic movement of the pack. And so we drift to the end of our quiet journey through the shifting sands of recollection. We have walked the blurred lines where imagination kisses reality, witnessing how the mind softens the sharp edges of the past to protect the heart. There is a deep, abiding comfort in knowing that memory is not a cold, rigid archive, but a gentle storyteller. It edits our history into a narrative of softness, allowing us to release the heavy burden of absolute precision. Here in the twilight of thought, the past is a painting, not a photograph, and you are free to remember only peace. If you enjoy these quiet journeys, I invite you to like, subscribe, or share a thought below. It helps others find their way here, one sleepy soul at a time. There's nothing left to solve, nothing left to do. Just breathe. Let your eyes grow heavy. Let the soft, hazy mists of memory cradle your dreams. Good night.